I'm sure that 90% of the people in the room already know this gentleman, but we're going to have Greg Alpers come up, and he's going to talk to us about preserving and enhancing New Mexico rangeland through brush control. This guy's really neat because he can come and put on a seminar at your county level or getting CEUs or whatever you want to do. And he puts it on a level that at least I can understand, so that means most everybody should be able to understand it if I can. And it's just so practical what he has to tell you and what he wants and how he shows you how to do things. And, you know, he's a nuts and bolts guy. It either works or it doesn't work. Put this out or don't put this out. And so that's what's so cool about this guy. And I've got a bio here I'm going to read, but, you know, Greg's just a cool guy, and that's all there is to it. And he was born on a farm and ranch in central Kansas. We got him to move to New Mexico in 1968. He graduated from Goddard High School, and then he went on to NMSU in 76, and his major was agronomy with a minor in animal science and biology. Then he spent 5 years working for the Schrimsher Brothers out of Roswell, managing their fertilizer business all over the state. Then he spent 38 years working for Dow AgroSciences and covered all of the state and West Texas, and he managed their Range and Pasture business as well as their row crop business. He retired from that in 2019, and since then he's been a technical service provider for the New Mexico Association of Conservation Districts. He works for the State Land Office on their brush program, and he contracts with his old employer to help new hires and acting as Interim Brush Specialist for NMSU. I hope he remains as Interim Brush Specialist for the next 10 years. He's involved with legislative issues to help protect agriculture from people who take for granted what they eat. Greg, come on up.
Thanks, Cliff. Well, nice to see everybody here today. Do you know what the definition of interim is? It's when they can't get anybody else to do it. So I kind of got drafted into doing this. Is there a clicker? Thanks, sir. Well, I'm not going to tell you a lot today that you don't already know. I hope what I do or what I share with you helps you focus a little bit more on what you would like to do. So figure this thing out here. Okay, so why do we care about brush control? A 30% canopy cover of brush reduces your dry forage potential by 50%. That's a big number. 30% canopy cover of brush reduces by 25% the rain and snow that actually makes contact with the ground. And that is more pronounced in juniper. Because you might imagine with our summer monsoon rains, big expanses of juniper, that moisture hangs up in the canopy. And what's it like in the summertime? It's hot and it's windy. We lose all that moisture, never makes the ground. So we care because we're a world that is hungry for protein, and we need what ranchers do, and that is to upcycle rangeland resources into protein. And ranchers take limited resources on the rangeland, grass, forbs, water, and make protein. And ranchers do not get enough credit for what they do. Brush limits a rancher's ability to make protein, and that's, to me, why this is really important. Brush species are more adapted to drought conditions and can spread rapidly during long-term droughts. So we're going to talk a little bit about controlling brush. So you have to focus, you have to determine your objective and zero in on the target. I have 7 grandkids, all girls except for the 6 boys. And I wanted this little girl to, to be a good shot. All she wants to do is dance. So I talked her into shooting, but she wore her Frozen costume. And she is quite the good dancer now, 10 years later. So, factors to consider: site selection. Can you actually grow grass if you control brush? You got to have good dirt. If you don't have good deep soil, you're not going to grow a lot of grass. Do you have desirable species present that will allow your rangeland to reseed? In New Mexico, rangelands are very resilient. If you give them half a chance, if the good Lord blesses you with a timely rain event after a brush treatment, the land will recover. Once you get it recovered, you have to take care of it. You just can't go buy another truckload of cows and harvest that grass, because you'll be right back where you were. So another factor is the species you're trying to control. Identify. Are there multiple species that need to be controlled? Are you controlling invasive grass such as cheatgrass, or weeds, or brush, or trees? Then the method: mechanical, aerial fixed wing, either electrostatic or conventional. How many people know what electrostatic application is? Okay. Electrostatic is a method where you charge a spray particle the opposite charge of the plant. So it's like putting a car in a paint booth. Opposites attract, and your herbicide sticks to the leaf. You use 1 gallon total volume per acre rather than conventional work of 5 gallons. Makes a difference. We have really upped the rate of kill, especially on mesquite in New Mexico, with electrostatic application. Helicopter. Helicopter is a great way to apply herbicide. The beauty of a helicopter is you can sculpt, fly around trees. If you got a bunch of desirable trees, you can sculpt around it. You can sculpt around riparian areas, watersheds that you want to protect. It's a good tool. IPT, that's individual plant treatment, which can either be ground application with a broadcast sprayer backpack, an ATV sprayer, and then I write in bold letters, how do you eat an elephant? A lot of people look at a big brush job and they're overwhelmed. They say, I can't afford this. Well, I get that. Budget is an important consideration, but you got to get started somewhere. And I tell people, pick your best grass growing area that's being encroached upon by juniper or mesquite or pear, whatever the species is. Start there. That's where you're going to get the best return on your investment, is where your best soil is. So how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. You start small and get bigger. So on hand treatment, for the most part, you're utilizing fixed costs that you already have. You got an ATV, you got hired help, you can buy a $400 ATV sprayer at Tractor Supply or Roswell Farm and Livestock, and you can go to work. You employ people, maybe it's you. Is it you, Cliff? Well, when you don't have anything else to do, go out there and spot treat. You were talking to me about that this morning, I believe, about Velpar pellets. Yep. 1 bite at a time on that big old elephant. So proper timing and plant condition. Drought makes timing much more critical. And you may never get a spray window in a particular year because of the drought. And that's okay. Don't waste any money. Product selection. There are many chemistries available. Like for loco weed, there are 8 recommendations. So if you call me and say, what do I use for loco weed? I say, what's your number 2 species? What's your number 3? What's your number 4 that you want to control? And you select your chemistry based on the species you want to control. You try to get the most bang for your buck. If you're going to spend $1 for a herbicide, you want it to get as much control as you can for all the species. Long-term drought. How will the target plant respond? And how will your desirables respond? If it's a droughty situation, you may be spinning your wheels. You may need to hold. So the benefits of brush control, obvious: increased dry forage production, more precipitation into the ground. The more brush you convert to grassland, the more water goes in the ground. So less erosion, more water in the ground also means that over time springs do flow again, water levels come up. Reduction of brush and tree cover can slow catastrophic wildfires. We experienced a lot of that in New Mexico last year. Reduced brush means more forbs and grass for cattle and wildlife. And depending upon where you're at in the state, income from wildlife can be a key component of your budgeting. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the different species in New Mexico that are most common. Mesquite control in the 80s through the 2000s was highly variable. 15 to 75%, that's a wide variability, with an average around 55%. Newer chemistry, better application, and increased and better mesquite monitoring. Control now is from 55 to 90%. With the BLM, Ty Carter out of the Roswell, Southeast New Mexico office, who treats more mesquite in New Mexico than anybody else, says he is not satisfied with anything less than 80% mortality 2 years after treatment. Ray Keller, who received the Friend of the Industry Award from this organization, said, he told me last Thursday, the future of brush control in New Mexico rests with the adoption of the LandVisor platform or similar technology, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So important factors for mesquite: soil moisture, 3 to 6 inches of precipitation in the 3 months prior to treatment. Soil temperature, minimum of 75 degrees, 12 inches deep. The amount of leaf, the more the better. The leaf is your interception point for your herbicide, so the more leaf, the more herbicide you get in the plant, the better control you get. Carbohydrate flow in the plant has to be going down. Early in the year when mesquite breaks bud, everything's coming up in the plant to fuel the new stem and the new leaf. You can knock the mesquite leaf off then with anything. Diesel, 2,4-D, dicamba. Feel good for about 30 days, then it's going to come back. You got to have the carbohydrate flow going down in the plant to be effective. So, other factors are leaf color. You got to have dark green leaf from top to bottom. Light green leaf indicates that the carbohydrate flow in the plant is going up. Wrong time to spray. Another factor is you want less than 25% damage from a late frost, hail, insects, or disease. You got to monitor these things. You got to walk it. You got to look at it. So mesquite control is, to me, is best described as the three-legged bar stool. You have the chemistry, you have the mesquite condition, and you have the application. So most important is the mesquite condition. Monitor, 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 and then timing, timing, timing. New technology is available which has increased, as I mentioned earlier, the percent control we are getting. LandVisor is the program that most people use now. It's a satellite monitoring program that gives you an unbelievable amount of information and gives you a guaranteed performance. Similar platforms are being worked on, but that's the one right now that most people use. The mesquite process is similar to playing poker. You need to know when to hold and you need to know when to fold. Proper herbicide selection is the second leg of the three-legged bar stool. So listed are the products of choice right now. Most people use Sendero Remedy If they're trying to pick up cactus species, they'll use Sendero Tordon. There's a new one you probably read about called Invora, but it's not labeled for use on public lands because of some baggage it has. Then the last one is a qualified applicator. And this is important too, because you can have the best mesquite condition, the best chemistry, but get shoddy application, you're going to get a shoddy job. So you need to check references. Ask for references and check them. Make sure they know what they're doing. Have they operated in rough country, rough terrain? Do they pattern test their aircraft? Have they ever even flown brush? Years ago, we had a bunch of rice pilots out of Louisiana that came out here and did a 350,000 acre job for the BLM. It was a total disaster. They had never flown anything other than flat and level. So you got to check. That application is a key component. So cholla and pear, timing is everything. Desert plants are adopted to long periods of low moisture. Pear and cholla can be best killed when actively growing, and that's after good rains. 2 times of the year, in early spring, April to May, after good winter moisture, when the cactus is blooming, that's a great time to get it. Or in the fall, after a monsoon rains have started, and the mesquite starts to actively grow there and prepare itself for overwintering. So it's taking in herbicide, translocating it downstream. That's a good time. Midsummer is not good. It's hot, windy, long day length, dry. The cactus stops transpiring and will not take in herbicide. Do not treat. So what do we do on a hot summer day? We look for a shade tree, try to hunker up under it and not sweat. That's exactly what the cactus is doing. Pear is easier to kill than cholla. They're both slow to grow and slow to die and can take up to 2 years to fully desiccate. So the best products for cholla and pear, Surmount, it's faster on cholla. Tordon, Mazaview is a little bit faster on pear. The use of a good oil-based adjuvant is critical when you're making an application on cactus species. That oil-based adjuvant helps penetrate the waxy cuticle on the cactus plant. So some of the other big species in New Mexico are creosote, shenry, sage species, and tarbush. All of these are very susceptible to spike. Control, however, is subject to your soil type. Any soil with over 20% clay is going to limit the efficacy of your application. So if you have over 20% clay, you don't want to be using spike. You're just spinning your wheels. Spike is a pelleted herbicide. It can be applied year-round, but it's best applied prior to the rainy season. So again, we talk about application. Check to see if your applicator has calibrated his aircraft. Wide swathing is common with spike, and you never know it for 2 to 3 years. If you drive from Cuba to Farmington, you will see a lot of wide swathed spike applications. Spike is activated by rainfall. So it may be a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years before it goes to work. Applicator's long gone. He doesn't care. Check the references, make sure they have their aircraft calibrated. And my personal position is I tell a rancher, if you're paying someone to go out spray brush, you need to watch them. If you show up at the airstrip or out in a pasture that they're spraying, they're going to do a better job. Juniper. This is a big one in New Mexico. It uses, in my opinion, more water resources than any other invasive species. Hand treatment, you can use spike. It's a pellet, you throw it out. You can use Remedy as a cut stump or basal treatment. That's almost 99% effective. Basal treatment is where you treat the base of the tree from the ground level up, about 14, 16 inches, all the way around with Remedy and oil. Or cut stump, like if you're treating alligator juniper, which is a resprouter, cut it, paint the cambium layer with Remedy and oil. That tree will never come back. Aerially, spike pellets work, 7.5 to 10 pounds, again with the same soil type limitations. Anything over 20% clay, you probably don't want to do it. It's very effective, but it is expensive. Okay, another aerial method is there's a 3-way mix that we're looking at pretty hard. I started this when I was still employed by Dow AgroSciences on the Corona Ranch, Corona College Ranch in 2013. We currently have 42 20-acre trials out, scattered from Wagon Mound to Pinon. And I see a man sitting out there that has a lot of these on his ranch, Mike Korn. Efficacy is right at 80% 2 years after treatment. And the thing that I noticed after it was brought to my attention was underneath the untreated juniper, you had to dig down about 1 foot to hit moisture. Where you treated juniper and it was dead and you had grass and forbs in the place of juniper, moisture was 4 inches deep. It works. So we're trying to bring that to the marketplace. Those of you who know Dr. Kirk McDaniel, he's been helping on this a lot. He kind of verifies what I do on this, but hopefully that'll come to you soon. The BLM has somewhat adopted it already. They sprayed some. Okay, there we go, general weed control. So a lot of times I get calls, say, hey, I got a draw full of cockleburs. They're all coming downstream they're coming from upstream from my neighbor. You've been there, Daryl? Okay. So are you dealing with an annual weed or a perennial weed in this general weed control arena? Timing is critical on any weed control. The smaller, the better. I get lots of calls that say, hey, I got cockleburs head high and they've gone to seed. What do I do to kill them? Well, you're too late. You can kill them, but it's not going to do you any good. So you got to look at the herbicide you're going to use. Is it contact or residual? Contact herbicides might be Gramoxone, 2,4-D, dicambal. Diesel is contact herbicide. Is it residual? In other words, will it kill the plant and do you have some activity remaining in the soil for a while? That might be Tordon or Milestone. Tordon and Milestone have both contact and systemic residual activity. So is it a selective herbicide? Does it just kill broadleaf weeds like Tordon? No activity on grass. Or does it kill grass and not broadleaf? Might be Fusilade or Post, something like that. Or is it non-selective? Everybody's familiar with Roundup. It's non-selective. At the right rate, it will kill just about anything except a person, contrary to what you see on TV. And I say that with a lot of experience because when I was in graduate school in New Mexico State, my project was working with a product called glyphosate before it ever became Roundup. And we started at 8 pounds per acre trying to characterize rates. So I've had more of that stuff on me, in me, and I'm kind of normal. I digress. Okay, there are numerous products for general weed control. 2,4-D, dicambia, metsulfuron, Grazon Next, Duracor, Surmount, Chaparral, Weedmaster, Landmaster, Plateau, Milestone, Overdrive, Cimarron Plus, Cimarron Max, and many more. The Circular 397 for New Mexico State has most of these recommendations in them. Texas has a good reference, and it's called the B1466. It has all this in it too. So why does brush dominate some of our rangelands? High level of seed production, think mesquite beans. Persistent seed bank, desert plants are adapted for long-term survival. So a seed will lay in the ground forever and finally germinate when conditions are right. They are very effective at scattering their seed, birds, cattle, wind, erosion. They take care of themselves. They know how to adapt to these harsh conditions. Brush is well adapted to tolerate moisture or nutrient stress. There are chemical and physical deterrents to browsing, thorns, taste. So livestock or wildlife don't ingest and spread some species. The ability to regenerate vegetatively after top removal. Mesquite, alligator juniper, elm, willows, all those things. That's one reason these things are persistent, because they have developed to survive. And they're long-lived plants, extended longevity. And then altered fire regimes. We used to control a lot of brush with fire, but that's a dirty word now in New Mexico. Fire's a good tool, but it can be cumbersome to operate. Grazing patterns of livestock, and Casey just addressed all that. Rest and rotation. Every manager dictates his own way to do it, but that can affect the way rangeland brush problems persist. Long or short-term changes in climate patterns, and of course, if you read the news, this is a big deal. Is it global warming? Is it climate change? Who knows? I don't think we know, but that can dictate how brush can be pervasive and spread on the rangeland. Soil erosion, wind and water, all that favors brush establishment and encroachment. That's a big problem in New Mexico, because in the monsoons, we get intense rains, 2 inches, 5 inches, 8 inches, cow pie floaters. And when you have that kind of rain, it spreads seed around. And here we go again. So there's some research indicating that the encroachment of brush began 150 years ago or more, and is a factor of long-term climate fluctuations, warm and cold periods. Think of the Dust Bowl in the 1928, 1942 era, how devastating it was to the U.S. The drought of the 50s from 49 to 57, the early 21st century drought, 88 to 2014, and then throw in the 1970 Time magazine cover, The Coming Ice Age. We're all going to freeze to death. That was the common sentiment then. And now here we are. Some people think we're at the start of a long-term dry pattern. Who knows? But we, in being the stewards of rangeland, can by some of these methods we talked about, Casey talked about some, about rest and rotation, treating brush at the proper time, we can help preserve our rangeland resources. So in summary, the expansion of brush into rangeland can impact key ecosystem components, such as forage production, which that can lead to higher weaning weights, herd health, better mama breed back with better forage, stream flow, groundwater recharge, soil erosion, species diversity, and carbon sequestration, which I'm not qualified to talk about, but Dr. Allison and Dr. Spackman from the university have written a paper. I personally think that there's there's a way for the ranching community to cash in on carbon sequestration. I'm not smart enough to put it together, but there's a lot of discussion right now that I think a rancher, because of what he does on rangeland, should be able to gain some income from properly stewarding his land and growing grass. So all these things can change the primary productivity of your land. So whatever you choose to do on rangeland, ground truth your target, check and verify. One of my grandsons and his dad shooting prairie dogs in their backyard. Focus on what you're going to do. Think about it. Don't waste any money. Pick the right site. Pick the right product. Only do it when it's going to work. Check your applicator. All those things can lead you to a successful job. And I see several people out here that I've worked with over the years that we've had a lot of good work, and we've had a couple that didn't work. Right, Tom? Yeah. But if you pay attention to things, generally speaking, you can get results that will enhance the value of your rangeland, grow you more dry forage. Because after all, you're just a grass farmer. Your combine is your cow. So, kind of ran through a lot here, and I have some of these in the back. This is a list of resources that you can utilize to learn more about brush control products, what they will and won't do. That top one, South Dakota State University, is about that thick. It has a tremendous amount of information in it. If you've ever thought about spraying a weed or brush on rangeland, that's one you ought to have. New Mexico State has several good publications. Texas AgroLife has a good quick reference for common rangeland herbicides. So all of these are really good resources for you as a steward of the land in trying to preserve what you're doing, increase your cover of grass, which is a big benefit all the way down the line. So I've got them in the back. I'll put them back by the coffee pot. So how much time do I have, Cliff?
Time for questions.
Okay, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What are some effective methods for managing salt cedar?
Okay, the question is, what are effective methods to manage salt cedar? That's one that I should have included in this because it is a invasive species in New Mexico. And at one point in time, we had a pretty good salt cedar program. Then it got dropped. Hand treatment with a basal spray or a cut stump. Cut it, treat it with remedy. Very effective. It's cumbersome, time-consuming. Your cost is more for labor than for the herbicide. And it is selective, prescriptive. You're not going to kill any grass that way. And you can have a native cottonwood right here and a salt cedar right here. You can kill the salt cedar without killing the cottonwood. From an aerial perspective, arsenal or habitat plus 0.5% of Roundup works well, but it's non-selective. Have you driven from San Antonio, New Mexico, across to Carrizosa? And several years ago, they treated all that salt cedar, and then it was a giant forest of tumbleweed. That's because that was a non-selective treatment. And when you do a non-selective treatment, nature fills a void, and it became a forest of giant tumbleweeds. So if you look at that now, the natural succession, you have your annual species, your pigweed, your Russian thistle, that's starting to convert to grass. Salt cedar is one we need to eliminate. If you have a dirt tank that you got salt cedar around, it's using a lot of water. You need to kill it. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Jim.
Greg, during your long career brush species?
So Jim asked, in my long career, meaning I'm long in the tooth, have I seen or encountered a change in distribution? Yeah, mesquite is spreading, no doubt. I don't see creosote tar bush spread as fast, but mesquite is spreading. And you've seen this up on your place where you have a nice grass meadow. You drive by there and you see 3 or 4 small junipers boot top high. You drive by them for 10 more years and all of a sudden you have a forest. So yes, they are spreading. And you and I had this discussion a little bit ago about after a treatment, you need to follow up. Jim has done a lot of spike treatments for juniper up at Newkirk at his place. And I asked him, is any of that coming back? And he said, no, I got to follow up. So earlier I mentioned that the size of your species that you're treating, the smaller, the better. So Jim's gone back through and spot sprayed those junipers. And because of that, you've maintained your grassland and you've increased your return on investment. But you got to stay on top of it. No one treatment is a silver bullet because it's going to keep coming at you, the brush. Anybody else? Katie.
After you use chemical to knock back mesquite or creosote, is there anything to recommend to producers as to what to do with the skeletons left behind?
Katie asked, after you have a mesquite treatment or any other brush treatment, what do you do with the skeletons? 2 to 3 years, cattle will push those down. Because think about a mesquite plant. It's deciduous. It drops its leaves every year. And the wind blows out here once or twice a year. So native grass seed blows up in that dead mesquite bush where your mulch is from years of leaf dropping. That's where your new grass comes from. That's your grass factory. And cattle, over a 2 to 3 year period, will push that down and start getting in there and getting that grass. Now, if you're in the prairie chicken country, where we treat a lot of mesquite, they go in with a roller chopper and knock it down because they don't want any vertical structure for raptors to perch on to get the prairie chickens. But most people don't do anything. Juniper, on the other hand, haven't figured that one out yet because a standing juniper will last 100 years. Firewood, it's the best thing. Anything else? All right, thank you.